Okay, so I've managed to figure out how to do this. So I'm talking about the Hotel Delta 8 Golf 2025, the expedition to the Galapagos Islands. So first of all, what's so special about the Galapagos Islands? Well, both from a ham radio point of view as well as an evolutionary biology point of view, the answer is the same. The Galapagos are 1,000 kilometers away from the mainland. That 1,000 kilometers is beyond the ARRL 350 kilometer limit. So the Galapagos is a separate entity. But more importantly, from both Darwin's point of view and from a point of view of evolutionary biology, the Galapagos is in this Goldilocks zone away from the mainland. Any further, and there'd be absolutely no seeding of life from the mainland. It would look like Clipperton with a few crabs and a few birds and lots of guano. But instead, the Galapagos is in a spot where life can occasionally, mating pairs, make it from the mainland to the Galapagos. Now, the Galapagos compared to Ecuador, has a strange climate because the Galapagos is smack dab in the middle of a bunch of competing currents, with the main one being the Humboldt Current, which is cold. My wife and I dove there the last day, and I can tell you it was really cold. But each of the islands has its own microclimate with some competing currents that make some islands dry and warm and others wet and rainy. So when a bird, when a reptile like a Galapagos giant tortoise, when a small animal from the Galapagos finds its way to the islands, it has to adapt to survive. And with all of these multitude of climates, those adaptations can be very different from island to island. Okay, so that's enough evolutionary biology for now. So here's the Hotel Delta 8 golf team. We had 25 members speaking at least 7 native languages. So it could have been really disorganized, but it was beautifully organized, mainly thanks to this guy right here. This is Alex, PY2WAS. He's a Brazilian attorney who has spent quite a bit of time in many other countries. He speaks 7 different languages. He's listed in the 500 most prominent attorneys in Sao Paulo. He's also a really, really enthusiastic especially on DXpeditions. And he's been on a total of 18 DXpeditions over the last 20 years. Alex is a really cool guy. On the left, here's Alex posing on the roof of the Solimar Hotel, which is where we stayed. And on the right, there's Alex arriving with his wife on Latam. I'll go into the flights we took in just a moment or two. This guy on the left is Olms, PY5EG. PY5EG was his dad's call sign, and at his dad's passing, he assumed the call sign. Olms is a really cool guy. Olms is the Tim Duffy of Brazil, or Tim Duffy is the Olms of America. This picture here, can you guys see my cursor?
Yeah.
Oh, great. So this picture here, this is his home. This is where he lives. And you can see it's a big complex. He's a CEO of a large maker of industrial equipment in Brazil. You can see all these towers. There's some 4x4s hidden there. This is a station like K3LR, the station to die for. Now, let me see if I have anything else on him. Oh yeah, he was the 2024 CW DX Marathon winner with like 2,120 entities, doing 2024 alone. So he knows what he's doing. I was on a 3 a.m. in the morning shift with Olms, and he's got to be well into his 80s, and he was going strong. Just bam, bam, carrying on a conversation in English at the same time with me because, my Portuguese is lousy. On the right, we have a PY2PT, who's one of the caretakers of the PY6EG station, which you probably have worked as ZW5 Bravo. Everybody's works NW5 Bravo. They come in first in this contest and the other. Ohms has a special appreciation for the CQ contest, and he's on almost every single one of them from ZW5 Bravo. So here are the other guys, the foot soldiers. That's Beto PY6RT, and he's another experienced DXpeditioner. And he was on the recent trip, the Papa Romeo Zero Tango to Trinidad Islands, which you probably all worked. That was sponsored by Ohm's DX group called the Araucaria DX group. He's a really good guy, and he just loves amateur radio. Everybody in his family is licensed. The guy in the middle, that's me and my wife. One of the advantages of this is that Paul and I had the privilege of taking our wives with us on this trip, which is very unusual on a DXpedition. But there was a lot to see in the Galapagos Islands. Everyone got along just great. Let me see if I can X this out. Uh-oh. There we go. Okay, so that's Bruce, Papa Yankee 2 Bravo Sierra. We called Bruce L'Autre Bruce because we're two Bruces on this. Bruce is Brazilian. He's an EME guy. He loves moon bounce. His family emigrated from Hungary during the '56 revolution. So I guess that's how he said he has no idea how his Hungarian parents came up with the name Bruce, but they did. I've worked in that too. And that's Claudio PY2MC, another conquester. He's on the honor roll. Darko E70A. Darko doesn't really need any introduction at all. But I think he's been on a ton of DXpeditions, 3B8M, YI9DX, 603 Alpha, ET3A, 403A, E7DX. And he also works as CQ, the CQ3 Whiskey Superstation as well. The guy on the right, Dave, WD5COV, also doesn't need any introduction because Dave is the guy that put on an exposure suit and went swimming for fun in the Antarctic Ocean, just pushing ice floes aside as he went. He was on the Beauvais 3Y0J operation. Dave is a great guy. He's been everywhere. This is an older picture, I think. He in addition to 3 Yankee 0 Juliet, he's been to Yemen, South Sandwich, South Georgia, Eritrea, the Spratlys, Tokelau, and a bunch of others. He also was named the ARRL New Mexico Ham of the Year in the New Mexico section. That's Penguin, Don, N6JRL, who was at the 3 Yankees 0 DX district of Peter 1 about 20 odd years ago. But his main claim to fame and the reason for his ham life is the youth DX adventure, where he's introduced a lot of young people. And for us, that's mainly people in their teens and 20s to DXpeditioning, mainly in the ABC Islands. And I think they just completed their fourth DXpedition at this point. So Don is a really great other-centered guy. He was with Paul and I at Hotel 40 Whiskey Alpha as well. That's Fausto HC5VF. Let me see if I can move this around. Now, there we go. Fausto, Hotel Charlie 5, Victor Foxtrot, Francisco, HC5F. It's actually difficult to get. There is no SEPT agreement. There is no reciprocal licensing in the Galapagos. So the Ecuadorian guys were instrumental in getting us a license. Gertz, YL2KL, Hamilton, and PY6HD, Cervino, PY5HSD. Hirani, again, doesn't need any introduction, YT1AD. Junior, who was the life of the party, Papa Romeo 7 Alpha Bravo. Younger guy, supported by the Araucaria DX group. Every time you saw him, he had a smile on his face. Casper's YL1ZF. You can see what happens when you have 25 DXpedition members. It takes a while. Luciano, PY5KD, Mario, PY2 Delta Victor, who is a radiologist in Sao Paulo and also has one of everything that Yesu made. You can see a little bit in the background. Here's the bravest DXpeditioner in the world, Paul, N6 PSE. Again, he needs no introduction. There he is with his lovely wife, Cindy, and I made a list of where Paul's been because too much for me to remember. So YI9 PSE, South Sudan, Rotuma, Ethiopia, Yemen, Conway, Burma, Eritrea, South Sandwich in Georgia, Tomoto, again with the rest of us last year, and Clipperton. And he just returned safely from Turkmenistan, and we'll hope he can find the one magic guy that has the year of the leader, and we can work Turkmenistan one of these days. Paulo PV8DX, who was our satellite guy, but also a crackerjack CW guy. Ronaldo PS8RV, who was the network guy. That's his profession. We had 25 ops. We had 2 QTHs. We had 8 stations. We had 1 network that didn't work real well. So he was trying to keep everything running. So he was busy. Ruben HC5RF, Sergey R7KW, and this is a picture of us waving the flag. Dave, Paul, Don, and myself. Don's got a penguin tattoo that starts at an ankle and goes up to his knee. So he told my wife she can just call him Penguin, and she won't ever forget his name. Again, I want to bring up Dave Coulter, KB8OCP. And Dave put together this youth DX adventure. If you look around the room, you see we do need younger guys because at some point or another, we're going to get too old to get on these planes and make it to these wanted DX spots. So how do you get there? Well, this is kind of a modified Great Circle right here. The guys from Europe almost went entirely from through Miami. And then Miami through Quito. There's only 2 cities that you can get flights to the Galapagos from. That's Quito and Guayaquil. And most of us came through Quito. My wife and I, San Francisco, Miami, Quito. The Midwestern guys were from Houston. It was a little more direct. Houston, Quito. And the Brazilian guys from Sao Paulo, which is down here in the temperate zone, somehow over to Chile. And then from Chile up to Guayaquil. And so we all made it there. We all made it there within about 4 or 5 hours of each other. Don is an avid private pilot, and he couldn't help but take this picture, so I had to put it on. So again, we go back to the question I posed when we started is, why is the Galapagos Island so special? And that's a Galapagos sea lion. Again, that 1,000 kilometers means that it's close enough to the mainland to have mammals that can ride on the back of a palm leaf during a storm, to have reptiles, especially reptiles that tend to survive, to have, of course, birds that can migrate to the island and then not find their way back because of the prevailing winds. So it's an evolutionary laboratory. So on the Galapagos, there's 1,500 unique species that don't exist anywhere else on the Earth. And that's what makes the Galapagos so cool. So 250 vascular plants as opposed to single-celled and stuff like that. 20 reptiles, 5 mammals, 6 seabirds, 22 land birds, 2 marine mammals, and 86 species. I can't even read my own writing. So Darwin was a cool guy, and I really need to mention him. He finished his training and he signed on at age 22 as the Beagle's ship's naturalist. He spent most of the time in South America, so he became intimately familiar with all of the biology, the botany, the animals of South America. This primed him for this great aha moment that occurred. He was only 22 years old. He signed on for this 5-year-long ship's voyage. And you have to remember that at this time, it was felt that species were immutable, that at the creation, species were created and they did not change. He also roomed with an Anglican priest. And so that probably became very interesting. He was in the Galapagos for only 5 weeks. In the Galapagos, the famous story that you've all heard about the Darwin's finch, the Galapagos finch, he noticed that there was a finch there that resembled a finch species that he'd become familiar with on South America, but its bill was completely differently shaped. He also found that on another island, there was a similar finch with a completely different bill shape. And the bills were exactly suited to the plants and the size of the seeds that existed on each of these islands. So the drier, sunnier islands had bigger plants that made big seeds. The wetter islands had low-lying plants, and these birds had small pointy beaks that allowed them to eat the seeds. So he began to think about this, and he began to feel that maybe there was another force, what he called the force of natural selection, which was revolutionary for this time. It was heresy. It was not what was in the Bible. Again, what's important about the Galapagos? Geographic isolation. Because they're so far from the mainland, they had isolated ecosystems. Adaptive radiation. Again, where these animals faced almost unique circumstances and had to adapt, meaning that only those that were fit for the particular environment of each island would survive and have progeny. The isolated evolution led to a high level of endemism. Endemism is where you have 1,500 unique species, and in endemism, you also can find dwarfism and giantism. That's why we have the giant turtles. The problem with the giant turtles was that as reptiles, they could pretty much live for a very long time with no food or water. I mean, these turtles weighed hundreds of pounds, and by the time you as a sailor made it to the Galapagos, you'd been eating salt pork for a year. So sailors, pirates, naval officers discovered they could throw a whole bunch of giant Galapagos tortoises in the hold of the ship, and they would last for a year. They didn't have to do anything with them. All they needed to do was make turtle soup whenever they ran out of turtle soup. Yeah. Hey, if you've been eating salt pork. So these are some of the species that are unique to the Galapagos. Up here at the upper left, this is the famous Darwin's finch. This is the marine iguana, Iguana marinho. And this is the only iguana that can swim, and I have a nice video of one later on that you guys will hopefully love if you haven't been too bored by then. This is a giant Galapagos tortoise. This is the kind with a domed carapace that exists on islands with low-lying vegetation. Another group evolved with a relief cut. Well, it wasn't really cut. It was an old auto mechanic. They had a relief in the shell, and they had long necks, so they could reach way, way up and eat something. This is a flightless cormorant, the only flightless cormorant in the world, a Galapagos fur seal, a Galapagos hawk. We didn't see any of those, they're only on one island, but we saw pretty much everything else. Galapagos sea lion, there was a pet sea lion that lived at our hotel, Galapagos mockingbird, and Galapagos penguin. That's again is the other one we didn't see, but we saw everything else. So our trip begins. This is a baby version of the Galapagos tortoise with the relief, the saddle-shaped shell, so we can reach way, way up to get the food. Again, here are the Galapagos, 600 miles offshore of Ecuador. And here are the Galapagos Islands. So the Galapagos Islands were formed very much like Hawaii two tectonic plates are meeting underneath the ocean. By now, they're all the way up here. And as they override each other, volcanic vents open and little mountains, little volcanic mountains begin to grow, just like Hawaii. But this is backwards from Hawaii. The oldest, flattest islands are in the southeast. The newest islands with existent volcanism are up in the northwest. We did our trip to right here to the island of Santa Cruz, Holy Cross, landing on the island of Baltra, which was built by us, by the United States, during World War II as a defense against the expected Japanese invasion of the west coast of the Americas. So here's the island of Santa Cruz. Here's Baltra. You land on Baltra. There's a bus trip you take down the spine of the island. Then you take a ferry across the Ithabaca Strait. And there's a 40-minute bus ride or taxi ride up and over down to the largest town in the Galapagos, Puerto Ayora. And this is where we stayed. So here we are. Here's Aeropuerto Seymour, which is the original British name of the island. This is where we landed. This I thought was kind of funny. All the luggage arrived, but you couldn't grab it. So all the luggage was put up against the luggage, and you're supposed to esperar por la revisión canina. You have to wait for the canine review, which is a Chinese security checkpoint. So we waited and we waited and we waited about 15 minutes, and there were no canines on duty that day. So we got to take our baggage anyway. Here's the bus on the way down to, there's Bruce, PY2BS. And there's the view from Baltra. As you come down here, this is where you get the ferry. Here's a ferry on its way across the straits. And this is the main island of Santa Cruz. And you kind of imagine this was a volcano that's been ground down over the eons. Sometimes there wasn't a lot of seating left. Those are the endemic Galapagos sea lions, and they had first dibs on everything because most of them weigh more than you do. This is the town of Puerto Ayora, and our hotel, Hotel Solimar, was right in this little cove right there. This was the main harbor, and the other guys were at Steve Chalet. Steve Chalet's was in one of the most prime spots on the island, right down here. It had been a hostel. So we had two QTHs. The first one was Steve Chalet's. Steve is the son of an American who sailed there in the late 1940s, bought up some property, put up a hostel. You know, very, very basic, but a gorgeous spot of land, absolutely gorgeous. That's Paul. That's my wife, Medea. And there's a 5-element 6-meter beam up there. I got a note from Remy, and what's his call? FK8CP. He's a big 6-meter guy. He really wanted to work Galapagos. I wasn't very hopeful about it, but I passed it on to Paulo. And they were monitoring over at Steve's. They were monitoring 6 at all times, and they managed to grab me on a brief sporadic E opening. So I got an email from him 3 days later. Thank you so much. I hadn't done a darn thing, but Paulo worked him. This is the Hotel Solimar. This is where we stayed and where we set up. And it looks a lot like a stucco Miami hotel from the 1950s. It was charming. Here we are arriving and setting up antennas on the roof of the Hotel Solimar. Looking at the layout and the sat photos, we expected a lot more space, but a lot of the roof was taken up by walls and areas where they did the work. So there's Alex, PY2WAS, there's Penguin right there, there's Darko, and this is Bruce up here. He had this really nifty EME setup that could be brought on as carry-on. And he had this umbrella that he deployed, and I have better pictures of that. That's me up here trying to figure out why the SWR is so darn high, and that's Sergey. We of course were at Solimar. To get from Solimar over to Chief Salés, You had to walk about a half mile, 3/4 of a mile, and then take a water taxi that only went at certain times during the day, and then you had to walk from there to Steve Chalet. So we made it over there once. We had a selection of different antennas. Some would break and others would replace the ones that broke. Most of the antennas were omnidirectional, were vertical without really a lot of gain. We had some noise problems in town at Solimar because of the thousands of Chinese-made LEDs that would be lit at all times. There were decorative lights everywhere. They were really, really pretty, but our noise levels were crazy. We were getting reports on FD8 that were, that were 20 dBs above what we were hearing. So it changed delays, an S9 vertical antenna, which is just a non-resident 43-foot antenna that, at least in our experience over at Solimar, only loaded up on 2 or 3 different bands. We had a 160-meter dipole. They made a few contacts, but again, conditions were not great when we were there. The 5-element 6-meter Yagi you saw, and then the manually steered for satellite 2-meter 432. At Solimar, we had the best antenna was brought by the Eastern European guys. It was an old Cushcraft A3S, and it worked just great. And every chance I could do, I would try to get it, but they were using it for one station, and I would not have given it up either. We had a step IR, big IR vertical. I put in the little RAP as an editorial about steppers unfortunate stepping away from the ham market. The same S9 vertical, a Brazilian-made antenna called an antenna kit 10-meter, which was a J-pole with a little bit of gain. I used that on 10 meters and had a really nice run on sideband. A 60-meter sloper and 160-meter inverted L. And this was our support right down here. We put a little too much torque on it. And then a portable parabolic for 23 centimeters. Unlike a lot of DXpeditions where you have a half-ton pallet that shows up with all the equipment, this was a run what you brung kind of DXpedition. We all brought our own radios. I was originally going to bring my 7300 with misgivings because of front end overload and phase noise. Paul managed to talk some sanity into me, so we ended up bringing Paul's K3. Other than that, the Yaesu rigs did real well. The Eastern European guys brought a 7300, and when we were on an adjacent band during the FT8 transmit cycle, you could see about 20 decibels of quieting each time. So what they say is correct, and 7300s are great rigs. I've really enjoyed using mine on vacation DXpeditions like ZF2NQ last year, but they don't play well with others. Yeah. So you don't really want to do them on field day. You don't want to do them on a DXpedition. Because we had 8 stations, we had 8 operating schedules, but because we had 25 ops, there was actually a lot of time to enjoy the islands as well. This was our station right there, station 7. And we were sharing Paul and Dave, myself, Darko, and I guess that was enough. And so that's what the schedule looked like. All these were put together by Alex, who was a very, very organized guy. He mainly worked with tech compliance. So finally we get on the air. There are some pictures from on the air. There's Paulo right there having aimed his antennas. There's Junior with a smile on his face all the time, and the rest of the gang. Here we are over at Hotel Solimar, where they took these conference tables and put white tablecloths on them. So we were operating from white tablecloths the entire time. There's Paul, who, like his namesake, Paulo, always had a smile on his face. There I am, trying to figure out the CW through the noise, Darko, and the whole gang. Some more pictures. This is Bruce. He was in the hotel room directly beside our station with his long-suffering wife. And he would, whenever he had a view of the moon, he would be on, and he could go right out and make sure everything was doing okay. And he invited everyone into the room. And I remember going in at 3 in the morning and watching his contacts. He had right, he made about 100, I've got the club log statistics at the end, but if I recall right, it was around 120 moon bounce queues on 24 different DXCC entities, all on 1296. So he did just great. And he did these Herculean moving things around because he was set at first for moon set, then he set for moon rise. There I am on CW again, and the rest of the guy, and these were all posed pictures. So this is the parabolic antenna porn. Bruce took pictures of his parabolic antenna at night, at sunrise. There it is up on the roof. You can easily stand there and get to it. And this to me was the most remarkable. This was his station. And you can see it's pretty much just a carry-on EME station. And the parabolic reflector fits right into that tube. They call it an umbrella in Portuguese. I'd like to put in a plug for Bruce. He's going to be doing EME from Fernando de Noronha, October 8th to 15th. So less than 2 months from now. He's really good. So if you can do moon bounce, you'll have a good chance. Again, he'll be on 23 centimeters, just the way he was at Galapagos. He'll be operating PY0 FBS, and Mario PY2D will be there operating 80 through 10 sideband. And unlike certain gentlemen in Fiji, they promise free LOTW at the end of the session. This is Paulo, again, doing the 2-meter crossband, 70 centimeter satellite work. There's his ICOM, which is a cool little rig up here. And here he is on Oscar 7. And this was posted on the AMSAT Facebook page. Most of you know about Oscar 7. It was launched in 1974 or something. Yep. It lasted about 20 years and ran out of juice. And then years later, it came back, and it's still on the air, and it's 50 years old. So that is cool. They don't build them like that anymore. They call it the old lady. And here are the operating videos. How's that for a pilot? Here.
Japan, American Kilo, November Victor Whiskey, 5 and 9, Roger. Japan, American Zero, Mexico, Victoria Whiskey, 5 and 9, thank you, arigato. Nothing.
That's Holmes. This was middle of the night. They're BAs and JAs calling. This is FT8 Foxhound. When you see all that yellow and not too much red, you know you need to reduce your number of streams. This is our.
Thank you.
And again, lots of yellow, red.
I'll go get it. Actually, I gotta go pee.
Good. Okay, so as I said earlier, the fact that we had usually 2 and sometimes 3 3-hour shifts meant we had a chance to explore the island. So this was the raison d'etre to bring our wives with us. Here's a giant Galapagos tortoise, again, from an island that was drier and had taller vegetation. You can see the long neck and the relief in the carapace. This is called a saddle-shaped carapace. This is my wife and I up here in the upper right at the Charles Darwin Station, which is a breeding station to try to preserve the species. And there are a bunch of babies. There was also some chance for some beautiful hiking on the island. This was a 2-mile long pathway that went across the island to Turtle Bay, Playa Tortuga. And this was handmade. These were all volcanic rocks that had been quarried and laid down. And this is Playa Tortuga. You can see it looks a lot like Hawaii with the volcanic black rocks and the beautiful white sand beach. There was also a turtle. Excuse me. There was also a hammerhead shark nursery in this area. It was great. So again, this is Playa Tortuga, beautiful white sand beach, volcanic rocks, and we walked all the way over there, and it was just gorgeous. Unlike some DXpeditions, like Hotel 40 Whiskey Alpha, you guys saw the picture of the cat food we were eating. Food here was a bit better. That's my wife and I sharing a single Galapagos lobster. Again, this is a protected natural zone, so there really isn't any fishing except for the local restaurants and the locals. So that was great. So wonderful lobster, desserts that were far better than on Tuamotu, and a vibrant nightlife. There's Dave and Penguin enjoying a beer, something else we didn't have much of. And these are the guys who brought significant others with them. Hosing on our last night after the banquet. There's my wife with Junior. And again, he's just smiling all the time. And this was the whole group. It was a great group, no conflicts. It was wonderful. This is posing beside the pool. This is Dawn's video.
Airport.
You know the printer's on? I'm sorry? Oh.
Nice modern airport. And this was about 5:30 in the morning. This is the ride from the airport to the ferry. For those that took the bus, this was the arrival in Puerto Vallarta. We make a. And you'll see on the left, that's the Hotel Solimar where we set up. No antennas on the roof quite yet. The other way to get there was on the water taxi. This is what the back deck of the Solimar looked like. Pay attention to the pool. That'll figure in another video. The antennas are up. There's the Cushcraft A3S, the S9 vertical, the J pole.
SJ pole, SS9, SA3S. E lá tá.
That's a stepper with big IR.
E hoje sobe a slope para 60 e a de 160 que quebrou o mastro ontem vai para o outro site lá que é a Casa do Chico.
That's Don's sound effects. That's got to be mommy. Kid away. Found a shady spot. It's fine. Why do it? That's what happens when you stay in a motel with two small beds. This is Wendy. Wendy's an Instagram star that hangs out at the Solimar all the time. And if you go online and you Google Wendy at Hotel Solimar, you'll get videos of Wendy in the pool. That's Wendy. And this was every day. That's another Instagram post. That's Wendy's baby. Precious. I call this the Darwin's Finch buffet adaptation. This was the breakfast buffet. And those were the breakfast rolls. I mean, remember these guys all evolve without humans around. So they're not frightened of humans at all. They'll just walk right up to you. They have no idea what you are. This is a main street on a weekday. Again, this is like a cruise port where most of the Americans come and spend a week on a boat going from island to island to island. And so folks just live their lives out here. Beautiful little town, completely free of crime, great inexpensive food. This is what it looked like on weekends. Everybody's kids are running around. Nobody's worried. There's Ohms and some of the guys waiting to have dinner. This was a restaurant across the street that had the lobster. This was a store that just opened the last night we were there. My wife bought a bunch of dresses there. You notice none of the bicycles that have locks on. I love this. Marine iguana. Only iguana that can swim. You see how graceful he gets? And he's gonna duck into the mangrove and have sushi. This was our last day. This is what the Galapagos looks like underwater. That's my wife, just jumped in the water. There's no coral reef, it's too cold. But it's just beautiful for skiing. And that's first jumping in the water, a bunch of little nurse sharks sitting on the bottom. Okay. So how did we do? This is the club log stats as of last month, as of July. Galapagos was kind of in the middle globally, most wanted 147. What surprised me is that Galapagos was always a favorite spot for DXpeditions. So most folks worked them on CW and sideband back in the day, but you can see that global data was 128 over 340. Again, these are the results, and I thought this was fantastic. Down here, 23 centimeters, 133 contacts on Q65 in a total of 24 DXCCs. And again, our money bands were the usual 30 through 10. Again, conditions on the low bands were absolutely horrible, and we had the noise issues as well. Daily QSOs were pretty stable day to day. Breakdown by continent, Europe, 24,000, North America, 13,000. So we gave Europe a lot of contacts, and we also worked DPGRO GVN, so we completed WAC. Didn't expect that to happen. Again, breakdown by continent to me looks like a frequency map of where the hams are. You can see Europe, both Eastern and Western, east of the Mississippi, the west, few folks in southern Australia. But kind of what you'd expect with worldwide coverage. Again, continent by mode, a lot of CW contacts. Europe loves CW, 8,000 CW contacts with Europe. Should have more of that. Continent by band, again, pretty much what you'd expect. Again, a very cool thing was 1,499 adnos that we passed out, which surprised me because everybody's worked Galapagos except for those 1,499 folks. Again, thanks to the Araucaria DX group that supported most of the younger operators and provided LABRE, which is the Brazilian AARL, Guara DX group, and Mediterraneo, the Italian. ACOM that supplied amps to us that worked just fine. It's hard to beat a KPA 500. They're just solid as rocks. ACOM was nice. And the other sponsors as well, most of them Brazilian antenna companies. And a shout out again to Charles Darwin. You've already heard the Charles Darwin story, but it was that remarkable confluence of having spent years in South America and then seeing the similarities between species in the Galapagos. That's it, guys. Thank you very much. I hope it wasn't too boring.